It was one of those mornings that make you forget the world has sharp edges. The kind where the air smells like cut grass and coffee, and the only sound is a distant lawn mower harmonizing with birds. I'd spent 6 months rebuilding my old green Can-Am ATV. 6 months of grease, busted knuckles, and quiet satisfaction. Today, finally, it purred like a brand new machine. I didn't know it yet, but this same engine would soon roar its way straight into chaos. Our neighborhood sat in that strange middle ground between comfort and control. Clean streets, perfect hedges, and an HOA that thought it owned the air we breathed. On paper, it was paradise. In practice, it was a kingdom ruled by one woman, Karen Duke, self-appointed queen of compliance. She ran the homeowners association like a small-town monarchy, complete with fines, threats, and weekly patrols in her golf cart chariot. Most people bowed their heads and paid up. I learned early that silence is the tax you pay for peace here. My wife, Pam, loved this house anyway. She'd picked every curtain, planted every flower, turned the garage into my personal sanctuary. Saturday mornings were our ritual. Her with a mug of coffee on the porch, me in the garage, chasing perfection with a wrench. It was simple, steady, and predictable. And for people like us, predictable felt like safety. That morning, sunlight streamed through the half-open garage door, laying a golden stripe across the concrete floor. I remember wiping a smear of oil off my hands, stepping back, and admiring the ATV like it was a piece of art. 6 months of patience had finally paid off. Every bolt gleamed, every wire hummed. I could already imagine the first long ride through the trails outside town. The only thing left to fix in my life was a few squeaky hinges on the piece we'd built. Then I noticed something tiny, almost nothing. A shadow that lingered too long at the end of the driveway. Someone watching. I shrugged it off. Around here, curious neighbors were as common as garden gnomes. I turned up the radio, let the soft country music drown out the world. The smell of fuel, the hum of tools, the rhythm of the day. Everything was perfect again. But in hindsight, perfection is often the last calm breath before the storm hits. You see, when you live under an HOA, you learn to ignore the small intrusions, the letters about your lawn height, the warnings about your mailbox color, the subtle ways people remind you who holds the rulebook. Most days I let it slide. But deep down, something in me never trusted the false harmony of our streets. Behind every smile was someone keeping score. Behind every rule, a person ready to weaponize it. And no one did that better than Karen Duke and her family. Karen had a daughter, Madison, 16, spoiled, and smart enough to be dangerous. I'd only seen her from a distance before, always with a phone in her hand, always recording, as if the whole world was content for her personal show. People said she was spirited. I called it untamed arrogance. And in that quiet morning sun, I had no idea that she was about to turn my peaceful driveway into a crime scene. Pam called out from the porch, asking if I wanted breakfast. I smiled, nodded, and told her I'd be right in. I turned back to the ATV, gave the throttle one last twist, and listened to the engine rumble. Strong, steady, reliable, everything I wasn't about to be. If peace has a sound, it's the soft tick of cooling metal after a job well done. That was the sound filling my garage. Right before a storm of entitlement, lies, and revenge came rolling down our street. I was wiping the ATV seat with an old microfiber cloth, humming along to a faint tune on the radio, when I felt it, that strange prickling sensation of being watched. It wasn't the kind of feeling you can explain, but every instinct in me, the same instinct that once kept me alive overseas, said someone's eyes are on you. I looked up, and there she was, 16 years old, standing at the edge of my driveway like she owned it. Phone in one hand, that smug teenage half-smile plastered across her face, and her mother's shiny white golf cart parked behind her. The one with HOA president, fluttering on a little flag at the back. She tilted her head, recording me like I was a zoo animal. I didn't say anything at first, just went back to wiping down the ATV seat. I've learned that silence is often louder than words. That's a nice toy, she said finally, her tone dripping with the kind of condescension that only comes from being told, yes, too many times. It's not a toy. I replied, flat, not looking up. And you're standing on my property. She smirked, pushing her sunglasses up just enough to meet my eyes. Technically, she said, the driveway counts as common area. Bylaw 7, Section C. Mom says so. I stopped wiping the seat, turned slow, met her gaze directly. The concrete I poured, paid for, and maintain is my property, I said calmly. Take one more step, and it's called trespassing. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Her expression didn't flicker. If anything, her smile grew. That arrogant, untouchable grin that kids like her wear like armor. Relax, old man, she said finally, twirling a strand of blonde hair. I'm just checking for violations. Violations, I echoed. She nodded. Noise. Aesthetic disruption. My mom says. I cut her off before she could finish. Your mom says a lot of things, none of which are law. That earned me a sharp laugh, short, ugly, like a bark. You're funny, she said, her voice sugar-coated and venomous all at once. No wonder Mom hates you. Glad to return the favor, I said, turning my back on her and coiling an extension cord. The message was clear. Conversation over. But Madison wasn't the type to take a hint. I could hear her sneakers crunching against the pavement, one deliberate step at a time. The sound of quiet rebellion. She leaned forward, peering into my open garage. Her gaze skimmed over my tool bench, the rows of neatly hung wrenches, the spotless concrete floor, and then stopped. I followed her eyes, and my stomach dropped. The spare key box, a small black magnetic case, stuck to the side of a metal shelf right next to the door. I'd left it there out of habit. Convenience. A lazy little shortcut that was about to cost me everything. Madison's smirk widened. She didn't touch it, not yet. But the look in her eyes said it all. She knew what it was. And she knew that I knew she knew. You're lucky, you know? She said suddenly. Lucky? I asked, crossing my arms. Yeah, she said, her gaze still locked on the key box. Most people wouldn't even bother with junk like that. I'd have sold it by now. I didn't respond. I just kept watching her, waiting, analyzing. Her phone was still pointed at me, the camera lens gleaming in the morning light. Everything was a game to her, and she was live streaming the match. Finally, she rolled her eyes and pushed off the golf cart. Whatever. Keep your little toy, she said, her tone laced with bored mockery. Mom says it's a violation anyway, not in keeping with community aesthetics. Too loud. It's parked in my garage, Madison, I said, tightening my jaw. It's not making a sound. She shrugged. It's the idea of it that's loud. I didn't even know what that meant, and honestly, I didn't care. I turned back to my tools, deliberately ignoring her. The sound of her sigh, exaggerated and dramatic, echoed across the driveway. Then silence. For a few long seconds, I thought she'd finally gotten bored and left. I allowed myself to relax just a little. But then, a notification buzzed on my phone. Motion detected, garage camera. My head snapped up. Madison was gone from the driveway. I grabbed my phone, thumbed open the live feed, and my stomach turned cold. There she was, inside my garage, moving fast. The video showed her yanking the magnetic box from the shelf, flipping it open, and snatching the key. Her movements were confident, practiced, not some clumsy teenage prank. This was theft, clean, deliberate, and bold. The camera caught her face perfectly as she turned toward the door. That same smirk, twisted into something meaner. She thought she was invisible. She thought she was untouchable. I stepped out of the garage just in time to see her swing a leg over my ATV. No hesitation. No fear. She jammed the key into the ignition, started the engine, and grinned over her shoulder, holding her phone up like a trophy. Smile for the live stream, she shouted over the roar of the motor. And then she was gone. The sound of the engine ripped down the street, echoing between houses. The perfect Saturday morning I'd been enjoying shattered in seconds. I just stood there, frozen, phone still in my hand, watching the screen replay her crime in crystal clarity. My 6-month project, stolen. My peace violated. And somewhere inside that roaring sound fading into the distance, I heard the start of something bigger, something darker, because this wasn't just a kid being stupid. This was a declaration. Her family's rules didn't apply to them. And deep down, I already knew. She'd picked the wrong house. And the wrong man. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. The sound of my ATV's engine echoed down the street, shrinking with every second, until it blended into the distant hum of suburbia. I stood in my driveway, hands still slick with grease, phone in one hand, disbelief in the other. My 6-month restoration project, gone. Not stolen under cover of darkness, not taken by a stranger, but ripped from my driveway in broad daylight by a teenager who thought she was above the law. And worse, she thought she was being clever. The video feed on my phone was still rolling. The garage cam had caught everything. Every frame, every smug glance, every second of her crime. I hit record on my phone screen to make sure I had an immediate backup. Pam had always said, if something ever happens, record it first, feel later. Right now, that sentence was saving me from losing my mind. I stepped closer to the open garage door, watching the exhaust smoke fade from the air like the ghost of what used to be calm. My fingers shook as I dialed Pam. She answered on the second ring, her voice soft, unaware. Hey, did you start it up? That thing's loud. I took a breath before answering. No, Pam, that wasn't me. There was silence on the line. What do you mean? She asked, tension creeping into her voice. She took it, I said flatly. Madison Duke, the HOA president's kid. She just stole the ATV out of the garage. Pam didn't speak right away. Then, are you sure? I flipped my phone around and hit play on the garage cam clip. Her gasp on the other end told me she didn't need convincing. Oh my God. She filmed herself doing it, Pam whispered. She's live streaming. Yeah, I said, teeth gritted. She wants an audience. Pam's voice hardened. Call 911. Right now. I already was. The dispatcher's voice came through calm and controlled, professional, like she'd done this 1,000 times. 911. What's your emergency? This is Cole Mercer, I said. A 16-year-old girl just stole my all-terrain vehicle from my property. I have live video of the theft, and she's driving it through our neighborhood. Do you know the suspect's name? Yes, Madison Duke. She lives 2 blocks east, daughter of Karen Duke, the HOA president. I could hear the faint tap of keys in the background. Description of the vehicle? Green 2022 Can-Am Outlander. No helmet. She's filming herself while driving. Pam's voice suddenly came back into my ear. She joined the line through our home system. I'm on the other phone with 911 too, she said quickly. We're tracking her through the AirTag you hid in the rear compartment. My eyes flicked to the screen. The map was already updating, a red dot pulsing, moving north toward the main boulevard. I have her GPS, Pam told the dispatcher. She's on Lakeside Drive, heading toward Crestwood Roundabout. The dispatcher confirmed, units are being dispatched now. Please remain where you are. But I wasn't about to sit and watch my ATV vanish. I wasn't chasing her, not recklessly, but I wasn't letting her disappear, either. I got into my truck, phone on the dash, camera recording, and began driving at the posted speed limit. Just enough to keep her in view. From 2 blocks back, I could see the green speck weaving left and right, the ATV swerving across lanes. Madison was holding her phone up high, still streaming. She was laughing. A hollow, high-pitched kind of laugh. The sound of someone convinced the world is just a playground built for them. Dispatch, this is Mercer again, I said, voice steady. Suspect is swerving dangerously. One hand on the wheel, one holding her phone. Copy that, the operator replied. Officers are closing in from the north and east. Do not approach the suspect. I'm maintaining distance, I said. Just eyes on. The streets flashed by. Perfect lawns, quiet driveways, startled neighbors looking up from their mailboxes. All of them staring as the HOA president's daughter sped by like a maniac on a $12,000 machine that didn't belong to her. Pam's voice came through my speaker again. She's approaching the roundabout, she said. Her AirTag signal just slowed down. Maybe she's confused. Or showing off, I muttered. Then I saw it. She cut into the roundabout too fast. The ATV tilted on two wheels, fishtailing wildly before slamming back down. My heart stopped for half a beat. She recovered barely and kept going. Pam's tone sharpened. She's not stopping. She's heading east again. She's going into the residential lanes. Not good, I said quietly. Kids play there. I could hear the dispatcher relay that detail to the units. All patrols, suspect turning east on Willow Creek Lane. Heavy pedestrian zone. Exercise caution. Then came the flash of blue and red lights ahead, two cruisers. Relief started to rise in my chest, until Madison did the dumbest thing possible. Instead of slowing down, she gunned it. Pam, I said tightly. She's evading. I see it, she replied. She just went off the main road. The chase was on. One cruiser followed her into the lane, siren wailing. Another came around the far end, boxing her in. For a second, I thought it was over, but she didn't stop. She swerved onto a sidewalk, scattering two joggers, and tore down the narrow street. Mr. Mercer, the dispatcher said firmly, you need to pull over now. Officers are in pursuit. I'm pulled over, I said, easing my truck to the curb. I've got dashcam rolling. You're getting all of this. Then, through my windshield, I saw a white SUV appear from the opposite direction, barreling down the lane. It screeched to a halt next to my truck, tires screaming, and out stormed Karen Duke herself. Of course, HOA royalty in the flesh. She slammed her door, stomped toward me, sunglasses flashing like armor. Cole Mercer, she shouted, loud enough for the whole block to hear. What do you think you're doing, harassing my daughter? I rolled my window down slowly, keeping my voice even. Your daughter stole my ATV. The police are handling it. She did no such thing. Karen snapped. You can't prove. I held up my phone and hit play. The garage camera video filled the screen. Madison's face, clear as day, stealing the key, stealing the bike, laughing as she sped off. Karen's mouth froze mid-sentence. Her voice dropped to a hiss. You'll regret this, Mercer. Before I could reply, the radio in her SUV crackled. Her daughter's live stream audio still playing through Bluetooth. Screams. A squeal of tires. Then a crash. Every ounce of arrogance drained from Karen's face. The officer beside us turned pale and sprinted toward his cruiser. All units, signal 3. Possible collision on Willow Creek. I didn't need to hear the rest. I already knew. The smug laughter from 5 minutes ago had just turned into screaming panic. And somewhere down that road, the sound of justice had met the sound of impact. The sound of that crash still echoes in my memory. A sharp metallic scream followed by silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong, heavy, like the world itself just stopped breathing for a moment. Karen's voice broke through it first. High-pitched, panicked. Madison, where is she? What did you do? Before I could answer, the officer was already gone, sprinting toward his cruiser, radio pressed to his shoulder. The flashing lights vanished down the lane. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, forcing myself to breathe. In, out, steady. Panic doesn't help. Emotion clouds judgment. That was lesson 1 in every high-stress situation I've ever survived. I'd been through worse, real chaos, real danger. But somehow this felt just as personal. Maybe because it wasn't happening on a battlefield. It was happening on my street, my home. I put the truck in park and got out. Karen stood frozen on the sidewalk, her perfect posture gone. Her expression cracked open with fear and confusion. For the first time, she didn't look like a queen. She looked like a mother who just realized her daughter's world wasn't bulletproof after all. I didn't say a word. I just started walking toward the crash site. The closer I got, the louder it became. Sirens, voices, crying. People were gathering, phones out, recording. The modern ritual of witnessing tragedy. When I finally reached the intersection, the scene came into focus. My ATV lay sideways in the street, one front wheel twisted at a sickening angle. The handlebars were bent, plastic shattered. Madison was on the ground, sobbing, surrounded by officers. And on the lawn nearby, a baby stroller on its side. A young mother clutching her infant to her chest, both of them shaking. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. That could have been so much worse. For a long moment I just stood there, not as a victim, not even as a witness. Just as a man staring at the line between what happened and what almost happened. A line drawn thinner than anyone wants to believe. "Sir, please stand back," one of the officers said gently. "We've got it under control." I nodded and backed away, heart pounding in my ears. My phone buzzed. Pam again. "Cole," she said quickly, her voice calm but trembling. "I saw the crash on the news alert. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. "She's not hurt bad. But she almost hit a baby, Pam. Inches away." There was a pause on the line. Then Pam's tone changed, sharp, purposeful. "Then we make sure this never gets buried. Start documenting everything. Every word. Every second. Don't rely on memory. Rely on proof. That's Pam for you. While most people panic, she plans. That's why we work." By the time I got home, she had already pulled the doorbell footage from the cloud, organized the files, and started a new digital folder labeled Theft, HOA Incident. She had screenshots, timestamps, GPS coordinates, and even copies of the livestream Madison posted before her account went private. When I walked into the kitchen, she was sitting at her laptop, her eyes scanning lines of data like a detective in her own living room. "Sit," she said, not looking up. "Tell me everything." Slowly. I did, from the moment Madison appeared to the second the crash happened. She typed it all out, stopping only to ask for details. "What time did you see her? Which camera caught the key theft? Did she mention the HOA during the confrontation?" I frowned. "Yeah, actually. She said her mom told her the driveway was common property." Pam looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Then this isn't just some bratty teenager joyriding. This was premeditated." I raised an eyebrow. "You think Karen put her up to it?" Pam leaned back in her chair. "Karen's been trying to find a reason to fine us for months. She hates that you called out her bogus bylaw changes last year. What better way to get under your skin than to send her daughter to bait you into reacting?" I stared at her, the thought sinking in. Pam might have been right, but reacting was exactly what Karen wanted. Losing control. Giving her something to twist in the next HOA meeting. That's the trap bullies set. They push until you break, then point and say, "See? He's the problem." I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I took a deep breath and said, "Then we do this the right way. We stay calm. We use proof, not noise." Pam smiled. That quiet, confident smile that always made me believe we could outthink anyone. "Exactly," she said. "They rule with noise. We'll fight with evidence." That night, while most of the neighborhood gossiped online about the ATV crash, we were building a case file. Pam synced every video to an encrypted drive. I backed up my dashcam footage. We printed stills of Madison's face from the garage feed. Every click of the keyboard felt like reclaiming a little control. And when I finally closed my laptop and looked out the window at our quiet street, I realized something. The war had already started. I just hadn't realized I'd been drafted yet. When I say the neighborhood was quiet, I mean surgical quiet. The kind that only exists right before everything breaks. The kind that makes you notice how fast your heart is beating. Pam and I sat in the living room, our phones side by side on the coffee table, both showing the same red dot, Madison's AirTag signal. It flickered, moved a few blocks, stopped, then darted forward again. She was still on the ATV, still running, still convinced she was untouchable. "She's on Willow Creek Lane," Pam said softly, zooming in on the map. "That's the street with all the families." I felt my jaw tighten. That's a bad place to make a mistake. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was Officer Miller, the one from earlier. "Mr. Mercer, we've got 2 units in pursuit," he said, his tone clipped but calm. "She's refusing to stop. We're trying to contain her before anyone gets hurt." "Officer," I said, keeping my voice level. "She's a teenager who doesn't know what a throttle can do." That thing's powerful. If she panics, we're aware, sir. Just stay put. Stay put. That was the phrase I'd heard 1,000 times in uniform, and it never made me feel any better. Pam looked at me from across the table, eyes sharp and focused. Cole, she said, if she hits someone, I know. And then, through the quiet hum of the house, we heard it. Far away at first, a faint mechanical roar, growing louder by the second. I walked to the front window. The sound was coming from the east. Pam followed, her hand gripping my arm. We both looked out. The green ATV burst into view, tearing down the street like a bullet, Madison leaning forward, one hand on the handlebars, the other still holding her phone. Her blonde hair whipped around her face. She was smiling, laughing. Behind her, 2 police cruisers followed at a cautious distance. Sirens off, standard protocol in a residential zone. You don't scare a panicked driver. You box them in. But Madison wasn't scared. She was performing. Her phone was still pointed toward her face, streaming to hundreds of people who probably thought it was a joke. Pam whispered, "She's filming the whole thing. For likes." I stepped outside. The sound of the engine rattled my chest. Madison swerved past our house, inches from parked cars. I could see the wild gleam in her eyes. Adrenaline, ego, and absolute stupidity wrapped into one. Then, suddenly, a sound that didn't belong. A child laughing. Across the street, a young mom was walking her baby in a stroller. She turned at the noise, eyes wide. She didn't have time to react. "Pam!" I shouted, running toward the curb. The ATV hit the corner too fast, tires screeching, back wheel lifting. Madison's grin vanished. She lost control. The front end veered toward the sidewalk, toward the mother and stroller. Everything slowed. The mother screamed and yanked the stroller backward, diving onto the grass. The ATV clipped the curb, bounced, and slammed sideways into a row of rose bushes. The impact was loud. Metal twisting, plastic shattering, engine sputtering out in a hiss of smoke. Madison was thrown clear, landing hard on the lawn, crying in shock. The mother was shaking but alive, clutching her baby to her chest. The stroller had tipped over, one wheel bent, but the infant was crying loud, terrified, and blessedly unhurt. I sprinted toward them, my body moving before my mind caught up. "Are you okay?" I asked the woman, kneeling beside her. She nodded through tears, still holding her baby. She almost hit us. She didn't even look. She didn't. "It's okay," I said gently. "You're safe now." Behind me, the officers arrived, doors flying open, voices shouting commands. "Step away from the vehicle. Hands where we can see them." Madison sat up in the grass, clutching her wrist, sobbing. Her perfect white shorts were streaked with dirt and blood from the thorns. "I didn't mean to," she screamed. "It's not my fault." The officers moved fast, one checking the mother and baby, the other handcuffing Madison, who fought weakly against the grip. Her live stream had ended with the crash. The last few seconds, frozen forever online, showed her face just before the realization hit. She wasn't untouchable anymore. Karen arrived minutes later. Her SUV screeched to a stop. She ran out barefoot, still in her pink tracksuit, eyes wild. "Madison!" she cried, stumbling toward the scene. "My baby! What did they do to you?" Her voice cut through the crowd of stunned neighbors. Cameras turned. The mother on the lawn looked up, disbelief twisting into fury. "What did they do?" she said, rising to her feet, baby still in her arms. "Your daughter almost killed my child." Karen froze, her face contorting, guilt, denial, pride, all battling at once. "She's confused," Karen shouted. "She has a medical condition. She didn't mean it." One of the officers, calm and professional, stepped between them. "Ma'am, your daughter is under arrest for vehicle theft and reckless endangerment." Karen pointed at me, voice shaking with rage. "This is his fault. He provoked her. He's been harassing us for months." I just looked at her, steady, quiet, unflinching. "I have video, Karen." Doorbell cam caught everything. She stole my keys. She stole my ATV. And now she almost killed a baby. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She didn't have a response to that. The officer spoke again, his tone gentle but firm. "Ma'am, step back, please." But she didn't. She kept muttering, pacing, shaking her head. A woman watching her carefully built house of control start to crumble. I glanced around. The whole neighborhood was out now. Phones raised, whispering, recording. The same HOA she ruled through intimidation was watching her crack in real time. The mother handed her crying baby to her husband, who had just arrived, then turned to Karen. "If my baby had been 1 foot closer, she'd be dead." Karen didn't answer. The officer placed a hand on her shoulder. "Ma'am, please step aside. We'll handle this." She finally stepped back, her face pale, her authority gone. Pam appeared beside me, her hand slipping into mine. We watched as Madison, handcuffed and crying, was lifted gently into the back of a police car. The flashing lights reflected off her tear-streaked face. Pam whispered, "This isn't over." She was right. This wasn't justice yet. This was just impact. The sound of arrogance hitting reality at full speed. As the cruisers pulled away, I glanced at the mangled ATV. 6 months of work, gone in seconds. But standing there, seeing that young mother clutching her baby, I realized something. That wreck could be rebuilt. Lives can't. That's when I made a promise to myself and to Pam. We weren't just going to get the ATV back. We were going to expose every ounce of corruption behind this. And by the time we were done, Karen Duke's reign over this neighborhood would be nothing more than a cautionary tale told by porch lights and ring cameras. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about accountability. And I was just getting started. That night, the neighborhood was alive. Not with peace, but with whispers. You could almost feel it humming in the air. Porch lights flicked on and off. Groups of neighbors gathered at the corners of driveways, faces lit by phone screens replaying the same 30-second clip. The crash, the screaming, the crying baby. And in every video, one name kept echoing: Madison Duke. The same girl who once strutted through these streets like a princess now had a mugshot floating across community group chats. Pam sat beside me at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. "It's everywhere," she said softly. "Facebook, Nextdoor, even TikTok. Someone posted her live stream before it got deleted. There are reaction videos already." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. This neighborhood eats gossip faster than it cuts grass. Pam smirked, but her eyes stayed focused on the screen. "Karen's trying to spin it. She's in the HOA group claiming you provoked Madison by waving tools at her." I raised an eyebrow. "Tools?" Pam turned her phone toward me. There it was, a post from Karen herself, long and dramatic, dripping with self-pity and lies. "Please pray for my daughter, who was manipulated and harassed by an unstable neighbor. He's always been aggressive and confrontational. The truth will come out." I couldn't help but laugh. A dry, bitter laugh. She's really leaning into the victim act. Pam's fingers danced across the keyboard. "She's forgetting we have proof." In less than a minute, Pam uploaded the full clip from our garage camera. Madison stealing the key, starting the ATV and speeding off. No narration, no commentary, just cold, undeniable evidence. Within 5 minutes, the comments started pouring in. "So that's the truth. Karen, you owe the Mercers an apology. That poor mother and baby. She's lucky nobody died." And just like that, the tide turned. Karen's carefully curated image, the polite, rule-loving president who just wanted order, started cracking under the weight of reality. The same neighbors who once flinched when she sent emails were now laughing at her excuses. I went outside to take a breath. The air was cool, still heavy with the smell of burnt rubber and oil from earlier. Across the street, I could see the Reynolds family, the ones with the baby, standing in their yard. The mother saw me and waved. I walked over slowly. "How's your little one?" I asked. She smiled faintly, exhaustion written all over her face. "Shaken but fine. Doctor said she's okay." Her eyes softened. "Thank you for stepping in today." For staying calm. I shook my head. You don't have to thank me. Just glad you're both safe. Her husband joined us, holding the bent stroller wheel like a war trophy. We're pressing charges. That girl shouldn't be driving anything with an engine for the next decade. She won't be, I said. The police are taking this seriously. As we talked, more neighbors trickled out, drawn by curiosity, by shared outrage. Old Mr. Lopez from 2 houses down leaned on his cane and muttered, "That HOA woman's been trouble since the day she moved in. Maybe now folks will see it." Pam joined me a few minutes later, carrying her tablet. "You should see this," she said, holding it up. The local news had already picked up the story. HOA president's daughter in reckless driving incident, neighborhood divided. There was our street in the background, yellow police tape fluttering. And there was me, blurred out, standing near the wreck. "They're spinning it neutral," Pam said. "But they've already reached out for a statement." I sighed. "Let's keep quiet for now. Let the evidence do the talking." Karen, however, couldn't stay quiet if her life depended on it. Around 9 o'clock, the Duke house lit up like a stage. Lights on in every window, curtains twitching. And then, as if scripted, Karen herself marched outside, phone in hand, live streaming. Her voice carried down the street, shrill and defensive. "I've lived here 12 years, she shouted to whoever was watching online. "I've served on the HOA board longer than anyone, and this is how we're treated? Harassed? Lied about?" Neighbors peeked out from behind blinds. Some recorded, some just shook their heads. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The truth was louder than anything she could scream. Pam whispered beside me, "Look at her. She's unraveling." And she was. The more Karen talked, the worse it got. Her story changed mid-sentence. First claiming Madison borrowed the ATV with permission, then saying it was planted to make them look bad. The contradictions piled up like trash in the street. By morning, the HOA chat was in chaos. Half the members demanded Karen resign. The other half asked for an emergency meeting. Even her own vice president, a quiet man named Howard Lane, posted publicly, "We've allowed power to cloud judgment. Time for accountability." Pam read it aloud, smiling. "That's one way to say, you're fired." I just nodded. She's losing her grip. But she's not done yet. Because people like Karen don't surrender, they escalate. And I could feel it, the calm before her next move. That evening, we got our first sign of what was coming. A black SUV rolled slowly past our house. Tinted windows, no headlights, crawling just under the speed limit. I watched it disappear down the street, turn the corner, then stop for a few seconds before driving off again. Pam noticed my expression. "You think it's her?" I nodded. "She's paranoid. Probably checking if I'm intimidating the neighborhood." Pam frowned. "Let her look. The truth's on our side." "Yeah," I said quietly, watching the tail lights fade. "But truth doesn't stop people like her. Exposure does." And at that moment I decided if she wanted to play dirty, I'd play smart. Because this wasn't just about stolen property anymore. This was about showing an entire neighborhood that fear only works if you give it power. By the time the sun rose the next day, word had spread beyond our HOA. Local reporters were calling, neighbors were dropping off food, and people who used to avoid me were now stopping to shake my hand. The same people Karen had ruled with fines and fear were waking up to something simple. She wasn't untouchable either. And somewhere deep down, I think she finally realized that too. Because for the first time in years, her house, the biggest on the block, looked small. The next morning, the neighborhood felt like it was holding its breath. For once, Karen Duke wasn't strutting up and down the street with her clipboard. Her blinds stayed closed, her perfect porch untouched. The HOA queen had gone quiet. Too quiet. Pam was already awake when I came downstairs. She was at her laptop, hair tied back, coffee half drunk, eyes locked on the screen. "Morning," I said, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. "Morning," she murmured. "You need to see this." She spun the laptop toward me. It was paused on a video, a shaky phone recording of Madison's livestream, reposted by someone online. The audio was grainy, but clear enough to make out her voice. Mom said it's fine, it's community property anyway. We're just doing a compliance pickup. I froze. A what? Pam leaned closer, replaying the clip. Madison laughed in the video, turning the camera toward the ATV. She said it's better if we take it before he moves it again. HOA can fine him later. Pam paused the video. The silence in the room thickened. She wasn't joyriding, Pam said quietly. She thought she was doing her mom a favor. The pieces started falling into place. Ugly, jagged, and deliberate. I opened my notebook from the night before. Compliance pickup, I repeated. That's not a real term, but... She said it like it was something she'd heard before. Pam clicked open another tab, the HOA website. Every page looked polished and professional, filled with vague legal jargon. But as she scrolled down, a small link at the bottom caught her eye. Look at this, she said. HOA Maintenance and Compliance Services, Vehicle Relocation Division. I frowned. That's not a thing. Pam clicked the link. It opened a blank page. No text, just a header and a broken image icon. But the site URL ended with /pickups. We exchanged a look. Pam reached for her tablet and typed Vehicle Pickup HOA into the search bar. Within seconds, a local online marketplace listing popped up. Compliance vehicle removal, neighborhood cleanups /HOA approved, available weekdays and weekends, discreet removal of non-compliant vehicles, storage available for board review. The contact info at the bottom made my stomach drop. Gage Auto Services, owned by Gage Dalton. Gage, the same guy who Karen hired last summer to fix a neighbor's fence and somehow charged triple for it. The same guy who'd been seen drinking beer with her husband during HOA inspections. Pam exhaled slowly. So that's her play. She's running a racket, I said, the anger simmering under my calm voice. She fines people for bogus violations, then uses her contacts to remove their vehicles, and probably sells them off for cash. Pam nodded grimly, and Madison must have overheard her talking about it. She thought taking your ATV was part of that system. A routine job. I sat back in my chair, letting the realization settle like dust in sunlight. She wasn't stealing for fun, I said quietly. She was imitating her mom. Pam's eyes softened for a moment. Still doesn't make it right, but it explains a lot. I looked at her screen again, the listing still open. We need proof this is connected to Karen directly. Something we can take to the police, not just speculation. Pam grinned, that sharp, clever grin I've learned to trust. Already working on it. She opened another folder on her desktop. Inside were screenshots, timestamps, and digital receipts she'd been compiling since last night. This, she said, clicking one file, is a payment record from the HOA account to Gage Auto Services, labeled as Vehicle Removal Fee. Let me guess, I said. No official paperwork filed with the city? None, she replied. And the kicker? The payments are irregular. Not monthly, not scheduled. Every one of them lines up with a complaint Karen herself filed against homeowners. Like clockwork. I stared at the screen, then let out a low whistle. Pam, you're scary when you're right. She smirked. That's why you married me. We sat there for a moment in silence, both of us realizing how deep this went. This wasn't just HOA abuse, this was theft under a badge of authority. I stood and walked toward the garage window. The mangled remains of my ATV sat under a tarp, waiting for the insurance claim. The sight still hurt, but now it meant something more. It was evidence, a piece of a bigger puzzle. Let's take this to Miller, I said finally. Pam nodded. Already sent him an email with the files. But I'm thinking we go one step further. I turned to her. Meaning? Her eyes flickered with that familiar spark. The one that usually meant she had a plan that would make me nervous but would absolutely work. What if we set a trap? She said. Bait them. I frowned. Pam. Listen, she interrupted, her tone calm but determined. They think you're just some angry guy with a broken toy. They don't know we've connected the dots. If we post a fake ad, something that looks like a non-compliant vehicle sitting in the yard, we can see if Gage shows up again. catch him in the act. I folded my arms. That's risky. So was marrying you, she shot back, grinning. But it worked out. I couldn't help but smile. Okay, say we do this. How do we prove it's tied to Karen? Pam leaned back. Simple. We involve Miller. He said the police department's already suspicious of her. Apparently there've been complaints from other neighborhoods. If we can give them video evidence of her team stealing something else under HOA authority, that's enough for a warrant. I nodded slowly, the gears in my mind turning. We'd need cameras, timing, coordination. I've got it covered, she said. Just say yes. I took a long breath, then finally nodded. Yes. Pam smiled. Then we start tonight. Outside, the sun dipped below the rooftops, painting the neighborhood in soft orange light. The same houses that once looked so peaceful now felt like part of a stage, and every curtain, every closed blind, was hiding something. I looked down the street toward Karen's house. Her blinds were still drawn, but her porch light was on. A flicker of movement inside. She's planning something too, I said. Pam followed my gaze. Then let's make sure she walks right into ours. The plan didn't start with revenge. It started with coffee and quiet clarity. The next morning, Pam and I sat at the kitchen table, sunlight spilling across a mess of papers, maps, and camera batteries. Between us was a whiteboard covered in circles and arrows that made our dining room look like a crime drama set. Pam had drawn the operation flow herself, labeled in clean handwriting. Objective: catch Karen's crew in the act. Bait: fake, non-compliant vehicle. Evidence: multiple hidden cameras, real-time police coordination. Feels like we're back in the service, I said, sipping my coffee. Pam smiled faintly. Difference is, this time, the enemy's wearing yoga pants and a pearl necklace. I chuckled. Don't underestimate suburban warfare. We had already cleared the plan with Officer Miller. He loved it. Maybe a little too much. This could blow the whole racket wide open, he'd said the night before, eyes gleaming. But we've got to do it right. No hero stuff, Mercer. Let us handle the takedown. Now, we were in prep mode. Pam had already ordered a few things overnight: fake warning stickers, decoy security cameras, and a stack of blank HOA letters we'd found online. She'd even printed a few with Karen's fake signature for authenticity. The target? My old, beat-up lawn trailer. We'd move it into the driveway, cover it with a tarp, and stick one of those fake, unregistered vehicle notices on it, just begging to be picked up by Karen's partners. Pam was all business as she moved around the garage, setting up small black boxes on shelves and rafters. Motion detection, 4K resolution, timestamp overlay, she said, tapping each one. We'll have eyes on every angle. I watched her work with a strange mix of admiration and amusement. You know, I said, you could have made a great intelligence officer. She smirked. I married one instead. Easier benefits. By noon, everything was ready. The bait trailer sat in the open, perfectly placed in the driveway. On top of it, the HOA notice Pam had forged. Notice of violation, non-compliant equipment. Removal scheduled. It looked official enough to fool anyone who didn't know the real rules, and Karen's crew thrived on people who didn't. We didn't have to wait long. At 4:32 p.m., Pam's motion alert buzzed. Contact, she said quietly, eyes on her phone. Through the live camera feed, we saw a familiar black pickup truck rolling down the street, Gage Auto Services. Right on schedule, I muttered. The truck slowed in front of our house. 2 men sat inside. Gage himself wearing a ball cap and sunglasses, and another guy with tattoos crawling up his neck. They idled there for a few seconds, scanning the driveway. Pam whispered, "They're confirming the target." Then Gage's partner pulled out his phone and made a call. We couldn't hear it, but a few seconds later, Pam's phone lit up with an unknown number. A local line. She grinned. "She's calling us." I answered. "Hello." Karen's voice came through, sugary sweet and venomous underneath. "Mr. Mercer," she began, "the HOA has received yet another complaint about your property. Seems you've got an unregistered trailer parked outside. You do know that violates Section 12, right? I kept my tone calm. That's so? Funny. I didn't see that section on any legitimate bylaw list. She ignored that. We're sending maintenance to collect it. Standard procedure. Maintenance, I repeated, glancing at Pam. She mouthed, record this. Correct, Karen said. Gage and his team handle all our compliance retrievals. You'll get a notice later. And if I refuse? I asked. Her voice sharpened. Then it'll be considered obstruction of HOA authority. And I'll make sure that's noted in your record. I smiled, the kind of smile that only comes from knowing someone just confessed to their own crime. Understood, I said, and hung up. Pam's eyes gleamed. Got her. Voice and everything. Out front, the truck doors opened. Gage and his partner stepped out, looked around, then started walking up the driveway like they owned it. Their movements were confident, casual, practiced. Here we go, I whispered, pressing record on my phone. Pam switched to the side camera feed. Cops are 2 minutes out. We watched silently as Gage lifted the tarp, revealing the trailer beneath. He motioned to his partner. Yeah, this one, he said. Same as the others. The others. That single word hit like a sledgehammer. How many times had they done this before? They hooked up the trailer, tightened the chain, and started backing the truck slowly. Gage looked around one last time, scanning for witnesses. He didn't see me step out from the side of the garage. Afternoon, Gage, I said evenly. He froze mid-step, eyes darting to me, then to Pam filming from the porch. Well, hey there, Cole, he said with forced cheer. Karen said we could pick this up. Standard HOA stuff. Standard? I asked. Funny, because I just called the city. They don't have any record of HOA vehicle removal services. Gage shifted his weight. Look, man, no need to make this ugly. We're just following orders. Pam called out. You mean Karen's orders? That hit a nerve. His jaw tightened. He started unhooking the trailer fast, muttering under his breath. You people think you're smart. Then he stopped, eyes flicking past me. 2 police cruisers turned the corner. Sirens off, lights flashing blue and red against the sunset. The officers stepped out calmly, hands on their belts. Afternoon, gentlemen, Officer Miller said, his tone polite but cold. Got a call about some unauthorized property removal? Gage's partner mumbled something, backing toward the truck. Don't move, Miller said, his voice now steel. Another officer knelt, inspecting the hitch. Yep, no paperwork, no authorization. He looked up. You're both under arrest for attempted theft and property fraud. The look on Gage's face was pure disbelief. You can't arrest us. We're working for the HOA. Miller's eyebrow arched. Oh? Then maybe your boss can explain that downtown. Pam lowered her phone, still filming. Her smile was small but satisfied. Smile for the real camera, boys. The officers cuffed them both, reading rights as neighbors began gathering again, watching, whispering. This time, though, there was no confusion. Everyone could see exactly what was happening. Karen Duke's so-called compliance crew had just been caught red-handed. Miller turned to me, a small smile tugging at his lips. Good work, Mercer. You and your wife should join the force. I chuckled. We prefer civilian life. Pam leaned against me, whispering, You know what this means, right? I nodded. Karen's next. That night, we sat on the porch, the adrenaline finally wearing off. The street was quiet again, but this time it wasn't the calm before the storm. It was the calm after the first strike. Pam scrolled through the footage, neatly labeling each file. 1. Phone call, Karen confesses. 2. Gage theft attempt. 3. Arrest footage, full angle. When she was done, she looked up and said softly, This isn't just our win. This exposes the whole system. I nodded. And once Karen knows we've got this, she'll panic. Pam smirked. Good. Panicked people make mistakes. The porch light flickered as the cool night breeze brushed past us. Down the street, Karen's house was dark again. No lights, no motion. But I could almost feel her pacing behind those curtains, trying to figure out how everything slipped from her control. She'd spent years bullying this neighborhood with rules and threats. Now the same rules were going to bury her. I leaned back in my chair, watching the blinking blue lights fade from memory. "Pam," I said softly, "we're not just going to end this. We're going to finish it right." She smiled. "Then let's start tomorrow." Night in our neighborhood had a rhythm. Sprinklers hissing, porch lights flickering, dogs barking down the block. But that night, it all felt off. Too quiet, too deliberate. Pam and I sat in the living room, the glow of the laptop lighting both our faces. On the screen, camera feeds flicked from one angle to another: driveway, street, side yard, even the mailbox. Every camera was live. Every lens was waiting. Officer Miller had set it up perfectly. Silent coordination, no marked cars nearby, just two unmarked cruisers parked half a mile away. Lights off, engines cold. The bait was ready. The trap was live. All we had to do was wait. Pam leaned forward, chin resting on her hand. "She won't be able to resist," she murmured. "You embarrassed her. You cost her control. She has to try something." I nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the monitor. "And when she does, we'll be ready." Minutes ticked by, then an hour. The stillness outside was heavy, the kind that makes you second-guess every shadow. And then, just past midnight, it happened. A faint pair of headlights appeared at the end of the street, moving slow, creeping closer. Not Gage's truck, that was an impound. This was different. A flatbed tow truck. Black. No logos. Pam whispered. She actually did it. The truck rolled to a stop in front of our house. Two men jumped out, one of them tall and broad, the other slim and twitchy. They wore dark hoodies, gloves, no hesitation. They knew what they were here for. The taller one, the leader, checked his phone, then pointed to our driveway. "Right there," he said, voice low. "Same trailer, just like before." Pam and I exchanged a glance. The microphones caught everything, clear as day. The smaller guy muttered, "Karen said this one's okay, right? She cleared it." The leader grunted, "She's the boss. We just haul." Pam tapped her keyboard, marking the timestamp. "Got the audio," she whispered. The men backed the flatbed into the driveway, hydraulics hissing. Metal clanked. Chains rattled. They were fast, too fast. This wasn't their first job. 2 minutes, I said under my breath. They're practiced. Pam was already texting Miller. They're here. The flatbed tilted, gears whining, steel scraping against pavement. The taller man unhooked the chain from his belt and started attaching it to the trailer's frame. That's when I saw it, a silhouette across the street. Karen, standing half behind a tree, wearing a robe and slippers, her phone glowing blue against her face. She was recording, not helping, not hiding, documenting. Pam whispered, "She's here. She came to watch." Of course she did. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about control, about proving that she could still make us obey. The moment she lifted her phone, I stepped outside. The men froze instantly, hands halfway to the trailer. Karen flinched but didn't move. "Evening, gentlemen," I said evenly, voice calm and deliberate. "Didn't expect company this late." The taller one straightened up, his tone defensive. "HOA pickup. Authorized by management." I smiled faintly. "That so? You got paperwork?" He hesitated. "Karen said she'd handle it." Pam stepped out behind me, phone in hand, recording. "That's funny," she said coolly, "because Karen isn't HOA management anymore. She resigned this morning." The man blinked. "What?" Karen's voice cut through the dark, shrill and cracking. "Don't listen to her. I still have authority. Move the trailer." The men looked at her, confused. "Move it," she screamed. "That's an order." That's when the unmarked cruisers glided into view. No sirens, just flashing blue lights painting the street in color. Doors opened. Uniforms stepped out. Officer Miller's voice echoed across the lawn, firm and controlled. "Everyone, step away from the vehicle." Karen froze. The taller man dropped the chain. The smaller one raised his hands immediately. Miller walked straight up to Karen, his expression unreadable. "Ma'am, you're here late. Want to explain why these men are attempting to remove private property from someone else's driveway." Karen's mouth opened, then closed. Her brain was scrambling, trying to find the right script. I told them it was part of a compliance issue," she stammered. It's HOA procedure." Miller tilted his head. "Is that so? Because the city records show no active HOA authorization for property removal. And these two," he gestured toward the men, "they're already on probation for theft." Karen blinked. That's not true." Pam raised her phone higher, recording everything. "It's true," she said quietly. "You sent them. We have your voice on file giving orders. We have timestamps, payment records, even the fake violation notices with your signature." The smaller man turned on Karen instantly. "You said it was legal. You said you cleared it." "Shut up," Karen shrieked, pointing at him. "You're lying." Miller didn't even flinch. "Ma'am," he said, voice low, controlled, authoritative. "At this time, I'm placing you under arrest for conspiracy to commit theft, fraud, and misuse of HOA authority." Karen stumbled backward. "You can't do this. I am the HOA." Miller's tone didn't change. "You were." He nodded to the other officers, who stepped forward. The sound of handcuffs snapping closed echoed across the street like punctuation. For a long moment no one spoke. The flashing lights painted everything blue and red, reflecting off windows, cars, the wet asphalt. Pam lowered her phone, breathing out slowly. "It's over." I watched Karen as they led her toward the cruiser. She was still shouting, still insisting she'd done nothing wrong. But her voice was breaking now, the shrillness giving way to disbelief. As they put her in the back seat, she locked eyes with me. There was no more arrogance there. Just the hollow shock of a person who finally realized that the rules she'd twisted had snapped back around her. Miller turned to me. "You both did good work. This'll make our job a lot easier." Pam nodded. "What about Madison?" "Juvenile court hearings next week," Miller said. "She's cooperating. Honestly, she's scared of her mom now." Pam looked down, a flicker of sadness in her eyes. "She should be. That's who taught her everything." Miller nodded. "We'll make sure she gets help. As for Karen," he exhaled, almost smiling, "the DA's gonna have a field day." He tipped his hat, then walked back toward his car. The officers packed up, the tow truck was impounded, and just like that, the street was quiet again. No yelling, no sirens, just the sound of the wind brushing through the trees. Pam sat on the porch steps, staring at the ground. "You think this will finally stop?" she asked softly. I looked toward Karen's house, dark and still behind drawn curtains. "Yeah," I said, "but peace doesn't come free. You've got to earn it." She smiled faintly. "We earned it." I nodded. "We did." The first hint of dawn started creeping over the horizon, turning the sky from black to gray. I realized I'd been awake for almost 20 hours, running on adrenaline and coffee. Pam stood, stretching. "Let's go inside. You've got that look." "What look?" "The mission accomplished one." I laughed quietly. "Maybe it is." As we walked in, I glanced one last time at the driveway. Empty now, the trailer back where it belonged, untouched. But the space felt bigger somehow, like a weight had lifted. The HOA would elect a new board soon. The neighborhood would gossip, the news would spin their version, and life would keep moving. But for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. Because justice doesn't always arrive with noise and headlines. Sometimes, it rolls up quietly in the middle of the night, wearing a badge and a calm smile. And when it does, it feels like sunrise. For the first time in weeks, I slept like a man who'd crossed a finish line. The kind of deep, dreamless sleep that only comes when the noise finally fades. But peace, as I've learned, doesn't last long in neighborhoods like ours. The next morning, sunlight poured through the kitchen window, painting everything gold. Pam was already up, making coffee, humming softly. The air smelled like calm. Then the phone rang. She answered, still smiling. "Good morning, this is Pam Mercer." Her smile faded. Wait, what? Say that again. I looked up from the paper. What's wrong? She hung up, face pale. That was Officer Miller. He said, one of the SD cards from the evidence locker is missing. The words hung in the air, heavy, wrong. Missing? I repeated. How? They don't know, she said quietly. The card with Karen's recorded confession, the phone call where she authorized the pickup. It's gone. I stood, the calm evaporating instantly. That's not a coincidence. Pam nodded, her jaw tightening. They're checking the chain of custody. But Miller sounded nervous. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing. Without that recording, they've still got the sting footage, right? The arrests. Yes, she said. But without her voice tying it all together, the defense can argue Gage acted on his own. I leaned on the counter, staring at the floor. So the Queen might walk away clean. Pam crossed her arms. No, not if I can help it. I knew that tone, the one that meant she was already 10 steps ahead. What are you thinking? I asked. She turned her laptop around. Remember the backup system we used? The one that automatically uploads from the phone mics to the cloud. I blinked, then felt the spark of hope flicker back to life. You're saying? I'm saying I might still have the recording, she said. Not the original SD card, the cloud mirror. I stared at her, stunned. You didn't tell Miller? Not yet, she said with a small smile. Let's make sure it's actually there first. She opened a secure drive, typing fast. Rows of file names scrolled by, timestamps, labels, metadata. Come on, she muttered, scanning the list. Come on, come on. Then she stopped. A small grin broke across her face. There. She clicked the file. The audio started playing. Mr. Mercer, the HOA has received yet another complaint. Karen's voice, clear, confident, arrogant. We're sending maintenance to collect it. Standard procedure. Pam exhaled in relief. Got it. I couldn't help but smile. Pam, you're a genius. I know, she said, grinning back. But let's make sure it stays that way. She immediately duplicated the file, one on a secure external drive, another on 2 cloud backups. Redundancy on top of redundancy. Within an hour, she and Miller were on a secure video call. He looked both relieved and frustrated. I don't know who got into the evidence locker, Miller said. But this isn't random. Someone either bribed or intimidated one of the clerks. Pam didn't miss a beat. Karen's lawyer? Miller nodded. That's our best guess. He's been throwing money around, trying to slow down the DA's office. But now that you've got the backup, we can refile everything with the digital signature. It'll hold. I could see the tension draining from his shoulders as Pam forwarded the file. When the upload bar hit 100%, he smiled for the first time that morning. You two might have just saved the case. Pam folded her arms. We weren't about to let her rewrite history. After the call ended, I looked at her, half in admiration, half in awe. You realize you just did the police department's job better than half their tech unit? She shrugged. Some people knit. I do digital forensics. We both laughed, the tension finally breaking. But deep down, I wasn't done thinking about that missing card. Someone had gotten inside that evidence locker. Someone close to Karen, maybe even inside the system. And if they could do that once, they might try again. That night, I took no chances. I uploaded every shred of evidence we had, every photo, every video, every timestamp, onto multiple encrypted servers. Then I printed everything on paper, sealed it in a folder, and locked it in a fireproof safe under my workbench. Call it paranoia. I call it experience. Because people like Karen don't just fade away quietly. They reach, they claw, they manipulate until their last ounce of control is gone. And sure enough, 2 days later, proof of that came knocking, literally. Pam was in the garden when she heard the gate latch click. A man in a dark suit stood there, smiling too politely. Mrs. Mercer? I'm from the HOA's legal department. Karen asked me to collect a few of her personal items that might have been mistakenly removed from her office. Pam's expression didn't change. Office? Yes, he said smoothly. We just need her hard drive and some paperwork. Nothing major. Pam smiled, but it wasn't friendly. That's interesting, considering Karen's office was cleared by police. And if you're part of the HOA, you should know. She's been officially removed. The man hesitated. Look, I'm just following instructions. Pam leaned forward, her voice quiet and razor-sharp. Then follow this one, leave. Now. He blinked. Excuse me? She gestured toward the front camera blinking red above the gate. You're on video. This conversation is recorded. So unless you have a warrant, this meeting is over. The man hesitated, then turned and walked quickly back to his car. Pam watched him drive off, her jaw set. When she came back inside, she didn't have to say a word. She sent someone, I said. Pam nodded. Desperate people get sloppy. I looked at her and smiled faintly. Good. That means the end's close. And as I sat there, the reality hit me. This wasn't just about my stolen ATV anymore. It was about what happens when bullies think rules are their weapon instead of their leash. But now the leash was tightening. For days after the failed evidence heist, the neighborhood felt like it was waiting for something. Like the air itself was holding its breath. No one saw Karen outside. Her house stayed dark. Even her once pristine flower beds started to wilt, untended. The self-proclaimed queen of order had disappeared into silence. But I knew that silence. It wasn't peace. It was preparation. Pam was watching the news when it finally broke. Cole, she called from the living room. You need to see this. On screen was a live press conference, local news, courthouse steps. Officer Miller stood at the podium, flanked by the district attorney and 2 detectives. Cameras flashed, microphones jostled, voices buzzed. In connection with multiple counts of fraud, theft by deception, and obstruction of justice, Miller was saying, we have obtained digital evidence linking former HOA President Karen Duke to a network of unauthorized property seizures under the guise of compliance enforcement. Pam smiled, arms folded. They did it. I just watched quietly as the camera cut to a shot of officers escorting Karen out of her house. Handcuffed, head down, robe half falling off her shoulder. The perfect mask of suburban control shattered under flashing lights. Pam reached for her coffee and said softly, there it is, karma in real time. But what really struck me wasn't her arrest. It was her face. Not anger, not arrogance. Shock, like someone who still couldn't believe the rules applied to her too. The following afternoon, Officer Miller stopped by our house. No uniform this time, just jeans, badge clipped to his belt. He looked satisfied. You two saved us months of work, he said, setting a folder on the table. Karen was running everything through shell accounts. HOA dues, service contracts, fake maintenance jobs, even that vehicle relocation company. Turns out she made over $100,000 skimming off fines and fake removals. Pam raised an eyebrow. That's organized crime, not HOA management. Exactly, Miller said. The DA's calling it a community authority fraud scheme. Never seen anything like it in a small neighborhood. But thanks to your footage, we've got airtight evidence. I glanced at the folder. And the missing SD card? He smirked. Recovered. Hidden in her purse under a false lining. She took it before the sting night, thinking she could erase her tracks. Pam's lips curved into a slow smile. And now it's evidence against her. Miller nodded. The judge denied bail. She's looking at multiple felonies. Fraud, conspiracy, and tampering with evidence. And because she used HOA authority to do it, she'll lose everything. Her position, her home, even her pension. For a moment, the 3 of us just sat there, the weight of justice settling in like quiet thunder. It didn't feel triumphant. Felt final. Miller closed the folder. You did good, Mercer. Not everyone would have handled it with that much restraint. I shrugged. You don't win fights like this by yelling. You win them by being louder on paper. He smiled. Well, paper beat power this time. Pam chuckled. We'll frame that quote. A week later, the court hearing became the most watched event in the county. Every neighbor who had ever rolled their eyes at Karen's emails was tuned in. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Quiet, sterile, filled with whispers and nervous energy. Pam and I sat toward the back. Across the aisle, the Reynolds family was there too, the couple with the baby Madison almost hit. The mother gave us a grateful nod. Karen was led in wearing county orange. The sight was jarring. The same woman who once fined people for improper porch decor, now shuffling in shackles. Her lawyer whispered frantically to her as the judge entered. Cameras clicked. The air thickened. The DA presented the case methodically. Bank records, forged letters, the voice recordings, the sting footage. Every word tightened the noose around Karen's empire of control. Then came Pam's file, the backup that saved the whole case. The courtroom speakers played the phone, recording loud and clear. "We're sending maintenance to collect it. Standard procedure." You could hear the shift in the room. The sound of her voice, smug, certain, now played as evidence of her own downfall. Karen's expression barely changed. She just stared at the table, hands clenched, lips pressed white. The judge asked if she wanted to make a statement. She stood slowly, cleared her throat, and said, "I was only enforcing order. People broke rules. Someone had to keep things proper." Her voice cracked on that last word. The DA didn't even respond. They didn't need to. By the time the gavel came down, the verdict was clear. Guilty on all counts. Pam exhaled softly beside me. Finally. Karen's sentence wasn't long in years, but it was heavy in consequence. Fines, community service, permanent ban from holding any official role in neighborhood associations, and, perhaps the cruelest punishment for someone like her, public disgrace. As she was escorted out, she looked back once, scanning the courtroom. Her gaze met mine for half a heartbeat. No hate, no fury, just disbelief, as if she still couldn't comprehend that a man she once called unstable had outsmarted her with patience and proof. That night, the neighborhood had its own kind of celebration. Nobody said the word party, but somehow everyone ended up outside. Kids playing, dogs barking, laughter echoing through the streets that had once been ruled by fear. The Reynolds brought cookies. Mr. Lopez brought lemonade. People I hadn't talked to in years came over just to shake my hand. Pam stood beside me, arms crossed, watching it all with a soft smile. "It's strange," she said. "Same street, same houses, but it feels different." "It's lighter," I said, "like we all exhaled at once." She nodded. "That's what happens when fear leaves a place." Just then, Officer Miller stopped by, still in uniform this time. "Thought I'd give you the official word," he said. "Case is closed. But the DA's office wants to use this as a training model for HOA abuse cases statewide." Pam laughed. "You're turning our drama into a legal seminar." He grinned. "Hey, if it keeps another neighborhood from going through this, I'll take it." As he walked off, I looked around at the faces, the same people who once stayed quiet out of fear. Now they were smiling, talking freely, planning the first HOA election in years. Karen's house stood dark and empty at the end of the street, a silent monument to what happens when power meets accountability. Pam took my hand. "You think she'll ever understand what she did?" I shook my head. "Maybe, but understanding doesn't erase damage. Time does. Truth does." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's finally time for both." And for the first time in a long while, the neighborhood didn't feel like a battlefield. Felt like home. If the sting night was the explosion, the weeks that followed were the aftershock. The kind that ripples through lives, shaking loose what's fake and leaving only what's real. Karen Duke's name was plastered across every local news channel. The HOA office, once her private throne room, stood empty, door sealed, blinds drawn. And yet, the story wasn't over. Because there was still Madison. 2 weeks later, Pam and I sat in the juvenile courthouse. It was smaller, quieter, less dramatic than Karen's trial, but somehow heavier. Madison sat at the defense table, hands folded, face pale. The defiance that once lived in her eyes was gone. When the judge asked if she wanted to speak, she hesitated, then stood up. Her voice trembled, but she spoke anyway. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," she said softly. "I thought I was helping my mom. She always said the rules didn't apply to us, that we made them." I was doing the right thing. She paused, eyes glistening. But I was wrong. And I'm sorry. You could have heard a pin drop in that courtroom. The judge nodded slowly, his tone firm but fair. Madison Duke, your actions endangered lives. But you've accepted responsibility. Given your age, the court sentences you to 18 months in a youth rehabilitation program, plus community service and driving restrictions until you're 21. Madison nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. And in that moment, as strange as it sounds, I didn't feel anger. I felt pity, because she wasn't born entitled. She was taught it. She was a product of someone else's corruption, finally seeing it for what it was. Pam squeezed my hand. She's going to have to rebuild herself, she whispered. Yeah, I said quietly, but at least she gets the chance. If Karen's arrest shook the neighborhood, her removal from power changed it completely. 2 weeks after her sentencing, the HOA held its first open election in years. It was held at the community center, the same place where Karen once held mandatory meetings to scold homeowners about mailbox colors and lawn lengths. Now, the same seats were filled with laughter, casual chatter, and coffee cups instead of fear. I didn't plan to run for anything, but when Howard Lane, the former vice president, called me up to speak, I couldn't exactly say no. He stood at the podium first, clearing his throat. Neighbors, he began. We've been through a lot, but this isn't the end of our story. It's the start of something better. Tonight, we build an HOA that serves people, not punishes them. The room erupted in applause. Then he looked at me, and we wouldn't be here without one man's courage and composure. Cole Mercer. Come say a few words. I wasn't a public speaker. Never have been. But as I stepped up to the podium and looked out at all those familiar faces, people who used to avoid eye contact, now smiling back, I felt something shift inside. I'm no hero, I started. I'm just a guy who fixed engines and wanted a little peace. Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. But when people like Karen take power, I continued, they don't just steal money. They steal trust. They make you afraid to speak, afraid to stand up for what's right. And that's worse than any fine or rule. I glanced at Pam in the back, her smile steady, proud. So if there's one thing this whole mess taught me, it's that rules mean nothing without honesty. And authority means nothing without accountability. The crowd went silent for a moment, then burst into applause. It wasn't loud or wild. It was genuine. Howard took back the mic. I think we found our new community liaison, he joked. I just smiled. Let's hope we don't need one for a while. Over the next few weeks, things changed fast. The Reynolds family got their insurance settlement, new stroller, therapy support, and a neighborhood fund that Pam helped organize. Gage and his partner pleaded guilty, taking plea deals in exchange for testimony against Karen. The city even started an audit program for all local HOAs, inspired by our case. Pam called it the Karen Clause. Our neighborhood slowly came alive again. Barbecues replaced HOA meetings. Kids played on lawns without their parents worrying about noise complaints. People waved more, smiled more. And for the first time in years, the sound of an ATV didn't make anyone tense up. One quiet evening, I finally rolled my repaired Can-Am out of the garage. The engine purred, smooth, calm, familiar. Pam walked out, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. You sure you trust yourself with that thing again? She teased. I grinned. Trust me. This time the only thief around here is the one who steals the last cookie. She laughed. That easy, genuine laugh that had been missing for months. I revved the engine once, then shut it off and said, you know, it's funny. What is? How something as small as a stolen key can change everything. A chain of bad choices, good timing, and stubborn truth. And somehow it all ends here. Pam smiled softly. Justice doesn't always come fast, Cole. But when it does, it sticks. I nodded, watching the sun dip below the rooftops. Yeah, and sometimes, it even hums like an engine. When the story of our neighborhood went public, reporters called it the HOA scandal that sparked reform. But to me, it wasn't a scandal, it was a lesson. That control built on fear never lasts. That truth, no matter how buried, always finds a way to surface. And that ordinary people, when they choose calm over chaos, can rewrite the ending of their own story. Karen's name faded from headlines within months, but her downfall became a reminder whispered in every HOA meeting across the county. Don't pull a Karen Duke. Pam still teases me about that one. And sometimes, late at night, when the neighborhood is quiet and the porch light hums, I think back to the moment it all began. A spoiled girl, a stolen ATV, and a man too stubborn to let injustice win. Because in the end, it wasn't just about property or pride. It was about proving that decency still wins. And that's a story worth telling. There's something strange about peace. When you finally get it back, you don't notice it right away. You notice the absence of noise. No sirens, no gossip, no footsteps pacing behind drawn curtains. Just quiet. Real quiet. Weeks had passed since the courtroom, and the world had already moved on. The news cycle had found new villains. The cameras had turned elsewhere. But for me and Pam, the story didn't end with applause or headlines. It ended right here in our garage. I was tightening the last bolt on the ATV's frame, sunlight spilling through the open door. The same space that once held the sound of stolen engines and shouting neighbors now just held the soft click of tools. Pam leaned against the doorway, sipping iced tea, watching me work like she always did. "You realize this is the third time you've rebuilt that thing?" she said, half smiling. I grinned. "Yeah, but this time, I'm rebuilding it for me." She tilted her head. "Not for revenge?" I tightened the wrench one last time, then wiped the grease off my hands. "Nope. Revenge breaks things. Proof fixes them." Pam nodded, thoughtful. "You should put that on a coffee mug." I laughed, and for a moment it was just us again. No drama, no noise, no HOA dictators lurking in the shadows. Just two people who'd finally earned a morning without tension. Outside, the neighborhood looked different, even though technically it hadn't changed at all. The same houses, the same mailboxes, the same fences. But the energy was different. Neighbors waved again. Kids played kickball in the street without someone yelling about noise violations. The Reynolds family, the ones whose baby Madison almost hit, had just welcomed another child. They'd named her Grace. Pam called that poetic. I called it closure. At the next HOA meeting, people actually smiled. No one was fined. No one was scolded. Howard chaired the discussion calmly. Volunteers took turns helping each other, and someone even brought cookies. If you didn't know the history, you'd never guess this same neighborhood once operated like a dictatorship. When it came time for elections, they asked if I'd run for president. I laughed so hard I almost choked on my coffee. "I don't want power," I said. "I just want peace." And I meant it, because I'd learned something through all this. Something I'll never forget. Power doesn't corrupt people. It reveals who they already are. A few days later, I took the ATV out for its first real ride since everything ended. The engine started smooth, steady, confident, alive. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced at Pam on the porch, waving. Her hair caught the afternoon sun, her smile easy, warm. I drove through the back trails beyond our subdivision, where the trees opened up and the world felt wide again. Wind in my face, dust in the air, the kind of freedom you can't describe, only feel. The trail wound past the lake, the same one I'd avoided for months while the chaos unfolded. I parked by the water and cut the engine. Silence again, but not the heavy, waiting kind, the peaceful kind. The surface of the lake rippled under the fading sun, and for a moment, I saw the reflection of it all. The chaos, the fear, the long nights of doubt. All fading like ripples in calm water. Pam always said every storm teaches you something. This one taught me patience. Taught me that decency might move slow, but it never truly stops moving. That truth might bend, but it doesn't break. And maybe most importantly, that you don't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes you just have to prove you were right all along. When I finally rode home, the streetlights were just starting to glow. The neighborhood was quiet again. Real quiet. But this time, it wasn't the calm before the storm. It was the calm after one, the kind that lasts. Pam was waiting on the porch, her tea glass empty, her eyes tired but soft. "Good ride?" she asked. I smiled. "Yeah. Feels like I finally left it all behind." She stepped closer, slipping her arm around mine. "Maybe not behind," she said gently. "Maybe you just rode through it." We stood there for a while, watching the stars blink on one by one. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to look over my shoulder. Because justice had already done what justice does best. It settled things. The camera of life had finally panned out. No chaos, no villains, no dramatic soundtrack. Just the hum of crickets, the smell of rain on pavement, and the soft sound of an engine cooling in the garage. And maybe that's how every story like this should end. Not with revenge. Not even with victory. But with peace, the kind you earn when you refuse to give up doing what's right. Pam smiled up at me, her head resting against my shoulder. "So," she said softly, "think we'll ever live a normal life again?" I laughed. "I think we just started one." The porch light buzzed quietly above us. The world spun on. And for the first time since that awful day Madison stole my ATV, the air felt still.